Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. You have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here today. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 going on 15 novels of suspense. My current book is The House Guest, which you see on the door behind me, and look what just arrived. Book 15, One Wrong Word. I think I can do that with my face.
Oh,
A novel of, isn't that great? A novel
yeah.
of greed, gossip, and rumors. So One Wrong Word comes out February 6th. We're not talking about that today, though you will hear way too much about it when the time comes, I promise you. But today I am unbelievably honored to be able to talk with Daniel Sweren-Becker, whose new book, Kill Show, is absolutely rivetingly, marvelously wonderful. Please do not miss this. Run, 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 and get this book, not right now, after the show is over, after we talk to Daniel. But this is absolutely one of a kind. You will love, love, love it. It is life-changing. It completely will change the way you look at your life and the way you look at television. Trust me, it will. Let me tell you what the book list starred review said. Oh, I see everybody coming. Hey, Sherry. Hey, Deborah. Hey, Renee. So great to see you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. I'm always so glad to see you. Terrific. And you picked a great day to come. The book list starred review says, gripping. Sweren-Becker has crafted a clever, fast-paced, utterly absorbing tale that feeds into audiences' fascination with true crime, even as it explores the complex ramifications. And I mean, I'm just saying this book is terrific, and it's gut punch terrific. It says on the front, Daniel, it says a true crime novel. And it's not about a true crime. It's a novel about true crime, which is about a supposedly true crime. And I have to say that I wrote, and Jerry says, I want to hear the story behind the title, which is a great question, and we will get to that. I wrote in the beginning of the book, I'm so sorry I wrote in this book, not sure what's true and what isn't. So you got me with that. Talk a little bit about why you wanted to write a book about true crime using a not true crime, a fictional true crime.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I love talking about this book. This really came out of my passion for true crime and observing how much kind of time and energy I and other people I knew were watching the shows, reading the books, listening to the podcast. And ultimately, as I was deeper and deeper in that world, I just started to see so many fascinating moral gray areas. And I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable with my obsession with this genre, with the kind of global obsession with this genre. And the one thing I hadn't really seen was an exploration of the people who make this stuff, the journalists, the documentarians, the podcast producers, the TV executives, in the office towers. I was really curious about what is the cost for them emotionally, ethically, to go out into the world, find these crazy tragedies, and then turn them into a profit machine. And I'm uncomfortable with everyone on that. I mean, the audience, that's us, the people making it. I feel bad for the real life people who are selling their stories. So I wanted to put all of that into a pot, stir it up, and try to show something provocative of this is a lot more complicated than we've all probably thought about. Let's dig in here and see what's really going on.
And not only a lot more complicated than we've probably all thought about, but more fascinating and important and interesting than we've all probably thought about. I mean, I've been a television reporter for 43 years, and it was my job for many of those years to seek out crime and the victims of crime and the people who are involved in crime and the families of potential victims or victims of crime. And it got to the point after a while that I just couldn't do that part.
Yeah.
I would go up to someone's door and say, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan from Channel 7, and you don't have to talk to me, okay? Just say no. And that is really not what you're supposed to do. But I felt like sort of a vulture from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Although, and you talk a little bit about this, people watch this. They say, how could you ask that question? And then they watch to hear the answer.
Yeah, it really speaks to, I think, how should the audience feel? Again, that's us when we are demanding this stuff. And if you kind of understand the basic principles of supply and demand, that means someone is going to supply it. And it's amazing that you have these real life experiences. I think there is such a price to pay if you're going out in the world, listening to these tragic tales, and then manufacturing them a little, or packaging, I think is the right word, packaging them for other people to enjoy. Like, should real life tragedy be entertainment? I don't, I mean, we all find it entertaining, that's clear. But should we just take a look in the mirror and say, I just need to take a moment and acknowledge that someone really suffered for my entertainment? And look, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I am still going to watch true crime, listen to true crime, read true crime. But this book was an attempt at getting everyone to just step back for a second and go, wow, there is kind of this circular relationship going on between audience, producer, and the real life people. And I should really be aware of that when I enjoy this stuff.
Exactly. I mean, you wrote a book about it to get us to think about it with the true crime essentially as the point of it. I mean, we talk about how sometimes one of the reasons that true crime is so, whatever the word is, like attractive in a creepy kind of way.
Addictive. Let's say addictive, right?
And addictive too. And the curiosity factor is so huge. We want to know what happened. And I think there's also an element of, when we watch true crime, it happened to someone else and it's not us. You know, we're safe at home. We're not the ones to whom this terrible thing has happened. Yes. And it makes us feel reassured that we would have done it another way. We wouldn't have been in that position. Our family would not be in that position. This would not happen to us. Oh no. We try to convince ourselves that we're sympathetic and safe at the same time. It's safe to watch. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a real kind of transference of danger and a thrill that we get from knowing these things really happened. And especially if we are any kind of way similar to the people that we're observing. And I use a silly analogy here, so forgive me for its absurdity, but all of us, I believe, are driving on the highway. If we see an accident, we slow down and observe it. We rubberneck, right? Now, if you were driving on the highway and you saw an accident and it was the exact same car that you own with a bumper sticker from your high school and the exact same, football flag on the back, you would slow down even more, right? Because you would feel more connected to whatever happened to that person. So I think with these true crime stories, we all find a way to connect to it. Oh, this person reminds me of my sister. Or, oh, I did a similar job. Or, oh, I lived in that weird place in Florida for a semester one time. So we find our way to connect to it. And that gives us this personal feeling of, oh my God, this could have happened to me or someone I know. And now the story is just so much more resonant.
And Renee, let's go back to what Robin was saying. Robin was saying, is it really entertainment or a basic human quest to understand how and why bad things happen? That's so interesting, Robin, because that gives it a different kind of point of view.
So look, that is an amazing question. And I think it's both. And what I love about that question, and it speaks to such a deep theme I try to explore in the book, is when does something shift from being the truth to a story? And more specifically, what responsibility do these producers, authors have to tell the truth versus tell the best story? Well, journalists have a responsibility to tell the truth, right? And storytellers, TV writers, directors have a responsibility to tell the best story. But we've merged these two things together with true crime. We've created these journalist storytellers. And oftentimes they feel compelled to manipulate the truth to tell the best story. And I think that it's relatively obvious how this dilemma existed. This is in a capitalist system where the very best book or podcast or TV show is going to earn the most money. It's going to get the filmmakers the biggest promotions, right? It's going to get the biggest ratings, the most ad dollars. So any logical storyteller is going to manipulate that to get the biggest audience, the most money. And that is such a tough ethical position for them.
It is tough ethically, because you could talk about it as manipulation. And then I promise we'll get onto your book. You could talk about it as manipulation, or you could talk about it as creative crafting a story in a way that's the most, that will keep you watching it. that will be entertaining in a logical kind of way, that it has a beginning, middle, and an end. And that's one of the things that's so fantastic about Kill Show, is that one of your main characters, who is the producer of a true crime show, decides to do the show in real time, when she doesn't know what's going to happen next. Unlike covering a story that's over, when you can tell the story of what happened, she decides to tell the story as it develops, and that is risky. And we will get to you. We will talk about that in a minute, you all. Meantime, don't turn the channel. Let me tell you a little bit about A Mighty Blaze. If you don't know A Mighty Blaze, it was started 3 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, to keep us reading new novels and to keep us meeting new authors and discovering new books. And that is exactly why we are here today in our 4th year. Let me tell you a little bit about our author today. Daniel Sweren-Becker is an author, a television writer, and a playwright living in Los Angeles. He graduated from Wesleyan University and received an MFA from New York University. His play Stress Positions premiered in New York City at the Soho Playhouse, and he is the author of the novels The Ones and The Equals. His newest book is out from Harper right now, called Kill Show. So we've been talking about the themes of this book a little bit, and I want to go back to that in a minute. But first, tell us about Kill Show. How would you describe it? And forgive my little yellow stickies.
Oh, I love seeing the yellow stickers. No, Kill Show is really supposed to start with the most cliche premise that any of us can imagine, which is a teenage girl in a small town has gone missing. And this is supposed to be the average town, the average family. We've seen the story a million times. But what it really centers on, and where I try to turn the attention, it's about the people in Hollywood who hear about this tragedy and decide to descend on the town and manipulate the family into allowing them to make a real-time docuseries about the search for their daughter. And what we discover is their participation as they make this show has unintended consequences for the actual search for the girl, but also all of these consequences in their personal life. So it's a behind the scenes look at how a true crime show is made and what can go wrong when that happens.
I mean, unintended consequences is such a seething theme of this novel, when everybody is trying to do what they think is the right thing to do.
And let me just give a little dorky footnote to this. I doubt anyone knows this but me, but in the chat, please. So Casey is the producer, the main character. Her last name is Hawthorne, and there is a scientific principle called the Hawthorne effect, which posits that people who know that they're being observed change their behavior just because they're aware they're being observed. So I really wanted to explore the Hawthorne effect in this context of there's this family, they're desperate to find their 16-year-old daughter, but all of a sudden, there's cameras everywhere, and their neighbors are on camera, and the local authorities are on camera. And how do their decisions change by virtue of the fact that people are observing them? And then, of course, and we can get into this more later, not just observing them, but people all around the country are judging them and starting to want to participate in the events that are happening there. So that's the Hawthorne effect.
You see what I mean? How great this is, Kill Show. I love the Hawthorne effect, and I knew that, and I didn't.
Oh, nice.
I've thought about it all the time, because as a reporter, when I'm there, people behave differently than when I'm not there. That's why I have gone undercover for years, to see how people behave when I am not really there, or they don't know it. And it obviously makes a huge difference. But I think that is just supremely a genius thing. Talk a little bit about. I want to see if I can show this to you all. You see how it is written in sort of like not a script, but an interview transcript.
Yes. So
each person. Talk a little bit.
I have been calling that a fake oral history, which is an interesting phrase, because I would say that to friends as I was writing it. And each word is not like that complicated to understand. But when you put them together, fake oral history, it doesn't make a lot of sense, the same way a true crime novel doesn't make a lot of sense. And that really came from, I was obsessed with just for pleasure reading real oral histories. And some oral histories are about super serious things, like the Great Depression is a famous one. And then there's more fun oral histories that are like the making of the movie Dazed and Confused. And I was noticing how fast I would read these things and how accessible they were to kind of get in the minds of the characters, and how much fun it was to see characters recounting the same events, but from different perspectives and contradicting each other and validating each other and making fun of each other. And that was just a thing of mine that I enjoyed until I read Daisy Jones and the Six, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, Taylor Jenkins Reid. So she wrote a fake oral history about a rock band looking at their career. And again, I just tore through this book, loving the format, feeling I was inside these characters' heads. And I put it down. I just like stared at the wall and said, I would love to write a book like that, but I think there's another genre that this would work perfectly for. And it's the crime genre, the thriller, the mystery, looking back 10 years in the past, finding all the participants and having a fake journalist essentially go and interview them. So that's what you get in Kill Show. It's 26 characters looking back at the disappearance of Sarah Parcell and the day that Hollywood rolled into town. And they're all offering their memory of what happened, but obviously it's not the same for all 26 of them.
But I just, if readers, and when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, I see Katie and I see Randy. So welcome, welcome, welcome. If you told a reader, I have 26 points of view, they would say like, I'm not reading that, forget about it. I can't keep track of that. But this is so incredibly seamless. And I raced through it. I couldn't read it fast enough. It's like unbearably suspenseful, I have to tell you.
Let me add one thing to that before you ask questions. So the biggest thing I think me and my editor decided is that every time one of the characters is going to speak, we're not only going to include their name, but we're going to include their relationship and job title so that no one ever has to flip backwards and be like, is that the district attorney or is that the cop or is that the ice cream shop owner or is that the hardware store owner? So that little thing made it, I think, accessible for readers. So yeah, you're right. We were nervous about it at first.
It's so easy to read and so seamless. And I read it so quickly. I don't know. I guess that's good. How, as an author, I look at this and I say, this is a tour de force in point of view. I do not know how you pulled this off so gorgeously, so relatably, so quickly, so seamlessly. Was it incredibly complicated to do, or did you do it fast, or how did that?
It's funny. We just spoke for a few minutes about how this format is so unique and it allowed me to do so many things. But the truth is, once I decided to use that format, like when I put down Daisy Jones, I basically didn't have to think about the format again until I started writing. The heavy lifting for this project was all the planning phase, the outline phase, the walking around the reservoir in my neighborhood phase, like writing things on my hand type thing. And that was just coming up with the A to Z story of what actually happened in this town for all of the characters. And it had nothing to do with the format at all. And once I had that A to Z story nailed down, which took me weeks and weeks and months, and index cards are flying around, and I'm begging my friends to go get coffee with me so I can just talk about it and see their reaction. Once that story was nailed down, I felt so empowered to write this quickly. And I've got to say, using this format is like a magic trick for me as an author, because you get rid of all the prose stuff and you're just speaking from inside people's heads and you're not setting up the atmosphere at all. And then here's the best benefit, which I didn't realize at the time. When I finally finished my first draft and was pretty pleased with it, but knew I had to fix some things, this format allowed me to go back and edit so easily, because I could just look at a chapter and say, oh, you know who I'm missing right here? So-and-so. I would love their perspective on this. And I didn't need to come up with some ridiculous way to get them into a scene. Yeah. I could just conceive of a piece of testimony that they said and insert it right here. Like, I need a joke from this character, or I need a contradiction from this character. And it's like, there's this new scientific technology, CRISPR, that copy and paste DNA, right? I was just copying and pasting from my head and putting it wherever I wanted to bolster moments. And it was so much easier than traditional rewriting that I've done, which is where you pull a string out and everything falls apart. This was just so easy to slot in and out.
You just open up the novel, put something in, and make it seamless still. Yeah. Were you just, as an author, let me just personally ask you, were you just Sharon Carlson person? Hey, Sharon says, definitely very unique. Indeed. Were you just like so into it when you were writing it? It feels like it, reading
Yeah,
it.
now I'm actually. I just thought of a bad thing about that, which I'll get to. When I was writing it, I felt like I was on a rocket ship. That like I was legitimately writing this 6 days a week. Every single morning as fast as I could. I knew exactly what I was doing. It was coming out of me so easily. And I've written books before that wasn't true. And now you just got me a little bit grumpy because I'm trying to conceive of my next novel right now, and I don't feel that energy. And it's like, this is my new standard. If I'm not racing to the computer every morning to start writing, it's almost like I know I don't have it figured out. And that's the place I'm in currently. But if I can ever get to that standard again, that'll be amazing. So that's what I'm aiming for.
But it's all a process, right? And you don't know until you know. And the minute, 1 minute you don't know, and the next minute you do know. And that is the glory of, sort of a writer's imagination.
Yeah, I think what was happening for me in this is that I never knew if I was going to like nail a chapter or nail a scene, except when I got to the moment where I would need that kind of something that would really feel great to me, I would always have it. It would always come to me, which is how I knew that the work I had done beforehand was set up correctly. And look, I've been in the places where you get to the middle of a page, you go, I don't know how to end this. There's just no exciting way to end this chapter or whatever. And that's very frustrating. But those moments were rare for this book. So I'm really grateful about that.
I mean, again, if you just joined us, we're talking about, I should say it in the true crime way. If you just joined us, we're talking about Kill Show, the latest. We're talking about Kill Show. So run and get it. And thank you. In about 15 minutes, I will let you go do that. I want to talk a little bit more about it, though. We were talking about how Casey is working on this story in real time, not having a story that was already over that she was recounting, but telling the story in real time. And I'm searching here. I should have marked my tabs for. Let me just say, there's an element where her boss talks about her responsibility for keeping the show going. And if there was not new information, Casey would fail. Her ambition would be crushed. And so she's invested not necessarily in discovering the truth in real time, but she was invested in keeping the show going, which is a different thing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we're all familiar with having performance incentives in our job that you need to do your job better or keep doing it well if you want to keep your job. So that's just a normal thing that Casey was experiencing. Her boss was saying, hey, the last few episodes of your docuseries didn't go so well, the ratings wise. If you want to keep making this show and keep being employed and get your promotion, your next few episodes need to have higher ratings. That to me is not a crazy thing for a TV executive to say, except when the person making the TV show is making it about a girl who's currently missing. So I'm not going to give away a crazy spoiler, I promise, but there's a moment in this book where Casey has to decide if she's going to move a stuffed animal from one location to another. And the truth is, her moving that stuffed animal will not impact the outcome of the investigation whatsoever. No one's going to be arrested or saved based on where the stuffed animal is positioned. But her decision, and she decides to move it, is indicative of the pressure on her and what she's willing to do of, I'm no longer telling the truth about this situation. I am crafting a scene that's meant to get more sympathy, more eyeballs, more publicity. And I'll just play devil's advocate for a second. One could argue that she was helping the family by moving that stuffed animal. If she does keep her series going and does draw more attention to this family, they will benefit from the likelihood of saving their daughter. The problem is, once you move one stuffed animal, the next day you're probably willing to do something else. And then the next day and the next day, and where does it stop? So that is really the kind of complicated pressures that she felt, which I feel like are unique to a producer making a true crime series.
I mean, it is. I mean, the knowledge that you have just comes through so gorgeously about the thought processes, staging a scene, whether it's getting someone to say something, or as Casey thought about doing, moving a stuffed animal. Once you start messing with reality, once you start messing with truth, then all of the dominoes come crashing down, and you can never put it back together again. It's never real again.
Yeah, and I'll just on that note, I had like 80% of the knowledge to write this before I started, because my first job out of college was working on documentaries, and it had nothing to do with true crime, but I was familiar with going into people's houses, interviewing them, going into the editing suite, not manipulating the footage, but connecting the footage to tell the best story, having bosses pressuring you, telling the truth about someone, and maybe you're going to embarrass them. Maybe you're going to reflect poorly on them. So I had experienced that moral dilemma working in documentaries. Then I had spent a lot of time writing scripted television, where I'm very familiar with how to hook an audience, how to do a cliffhanger, how to keep people invested for the next season, stuff like that. The only thing I personally was missing was I had never really worked with people who were experiencing tragedy in the moment. So that was where I had to kind of do a little research and just kind of put my empathy hat on and be like, okay, I know what this is like without the craziest version, but what is it like for the people going into the home where their daughter is missing? That's much more intense than I had experienced, but I had the slight expertise for the other stuff.
Well, it comes through so gorgeously. Let me read you a little bit of what Anthony Pena, Casey's boss, says later in the book. He says,
Casey's partner editing?
Editor.
Yes.
Casey, sorry, thank you. Casey, an Anthony Pena editor. Casey was playing with fire and she got burned. I'm sure that was half the appeal to begin with. And I'm not the guy who's going to look down my nose at proper dangerous liaison. But I did ask her what we were going to do about it. And then it goes forward. Now it was personal. If our show didn't help Sarah come home safely, Casey was going to get blamed. Her choices, her decisions were going to be part of the failure. Everything was on the line for her. And that, I mean, we feel that from her.
And it's interesting. I think I mentioned this in some way in the book, but it feels like a lot of people involved in a tragedy have accountability in some way, and for good reason, whether you're an elected official or you're in law enforcement or you're in the media. If you do something wrong, you'll get in trouble. The one group that doesn't seem to have accountability is the producers, right? The people making the stuff. They can't get voted out of office. They can't get fined by some ethics board, right? So Casey is really determining the outcome of what happens to this girl, but she has no oversight above her, no training for it. And of course, that leads to a messy result that no one really expected.
Yes. And it's that's what we were talking about, unexpected consequences. But then when you're talking about true crime and how we focus on true crime and how people are so devoted to it, it's that it still happened, whether it's reported on or not, that thing still took place. And for local news, the decisions that are made on the local news level, and you cover that as well in here, so gorgeous. There's the moment when the story is over for local news. Even if there's no resolution, there's the moment in local news when something becomes more important than the story they've been covering wall to wall for the past X number of days. And I saw that with the Boston Marathon and with local murders. And I would say to my husband, I wonder how long this will last. I wonder how long till something else is the lead story. And the lifetime of a story on TV from that, but not the metabolism of the story to the people it affects. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I just see this great question about the race factor in this, so I want to get to that as well. To your point, I think you're speaking to a moment where local news as a public service versus local news with a profit motive attached to it. And of course, it would be amazing if local news just existed as a public service and every day they were passing along the most useful information to that community. But when you start to tie a profit motive to newspapers or news broadcasts with commercials, they start to have motivation of, well, if there's nothing interesting about this anymore, then we're going to move on from it to some. And look, there's that famous phrase, I'm sure you're aware, if it bleeds, it leads. But you can only run with that exact story so many days in a row until you have to find another thing that bleeds. And then to the commenter who mentioned.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because you have a thing that I've marked here, that you have a sociology professor, Molly Lowe, who says, Whether he knew it or not, a certain person was tapping into a cultural sweet spot. The journalist Gwen Ifill actually coined the term in 2004, missing white woman syndrome. It refers to the sensationalized news coverage and disproportionate attention given to the disappearance of white women. Talk about that a little bit. And I think that's what Randy was talking about as well.
Absolutely. So first off, the missing teenager in this book is a pretty 16-year-old white girl. That is very intentional. It's almost trying to say this is the person that the news and the general public would seem to be most obsessed with. And it is really discouraging and shocking to learn that when a white woman goes missing, there is a disproportionate amount of news coverage relative to women of color, even though women of color are suffering this consequence more often. So why is that? Well, it turns out that if you're trying to sell magazines, if you're trying to sell commercials, if you're trying to get your film into Sundance Film Festival, focusing on a missing white woman is your ticket to success and money. So I was trying to draw attention to that, and it goes back to, oh my God, when you combine tragedy and capitalism, you get some really gross outcomes.
That's my favorite quote of this whole time, and there have been many of them. I have one more question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And I see there are a lot. I'm so glad that you all are here. Renee and Randy and Mary Katie is here. That's so great. So one of the things that you had to balance, besides the tour de force of all of the characters, you had a good story that you had figured out, sort of the overview of the story, so you knew the story. So you had this great story with a unexpected throughout, not just a twist at the end or whatever, or a reveal, I guess, not a twist, but a reveal throughout. But you have this cool story told in an extremely cool way with themes which are revealed. You're not beating the reader over the head with them, but it's the themes that are revealed, and you allow us to understand the world in a way that we might not have understood it before. How did you juggle that so gorgeously?
Yeah, juggling is an interesting word because I think I wrote this book so I could do the 10% of it, which was talking about these social themes. And this really is a book of social criticism, or commentary, I should say. And I had conceived of the whole book with the plot of the events, and something about it was just like, this is just a fun ride. But for me personally, to get excited, I need this to be more than a fun ride. I need to be talking about things I'm interested in. And that was the moment where I decided to add two characters: the sociology professor who's commenting on the events, so she's a very smart character, and there's the cultural critic, almost this TV critic, who's commenting on the true crime obsession. And I use those opportunities to just be like, every 20 or 30 pages, I almost have an editorial that I want to get off my chest. And maybe it's about, men working hard jobs and how they can speak about their feelings. Like, you wouldn't think that that's related to
how people rationalize what they do, and just
right. It was just all these kind of hyper specific social issues that I created these characters to address. So I was able to, I think, justify their existence in the book because they are adding to understanding what's going on. But that was the fun part for me. A lot of plot, but once in a while getting in a little social commentary.
But that also allows the reader to reflect a minute.
Yeah, I hope so.
One little paragraph about, oh yeah, I never thought about it that way. Let me go on and read this book now with a little bit of enlightenment. But it's not heavy-handed at all. It's
okay.
just.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that.
I know I'm gushing. Forgive me. I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop gushing. And
don't stop.
Take questions from the audience. Who has a question for Daniel? Kim, hi Kim, says, what writer or writers inspired you?
This just comes to mind because I was so young, and I know he has a book out, but the John Grisham, in the way he could turn a thriller, right? And it's just like the way his books are 100 miles an hour.
Yes.
I don't think this is like so related to what I just did, but because he died recently, he's been top of mind. But Cormac McCarthy, where it's just like the beauty in the writing. And I didn't get to kind of aspire to that in this book, but it's always something that's almost like a North Star of like, God, one day I hope a sentence of mine or a paragraph of mine looks like it was written by Cormac McCarthy. More recently, I just read the Rebecca Mackay book. What was that one called? I have some questions for you.
Yes, I have some
So
questions
that
for
was
you.
a nice place, a nice book that was in the ballpark of what I was doing. That was really inspiring.
Well, you hit it out of the ballpark with structure, though. You're the Cormac McCarthy of structure. You've done.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'll get that tattooed on my hand now or something.
It's completely this book is quite special, quite special. Who else has a question? Why did you become an author? Okay, Katie, there we go.
Yeah, no, I'll answer this very honestly. It starts with just being a voracious reader as a kid and loving it and not thinking about ever writing books. And then as I became a teenager, went to college, my dream was to become a screenwriter, and I went to grad school for that, and I moved out to LA for that. And I was able to do that relatively successfully for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And being an author came out of a direct result of I had been writing only for TV comedies for that whole time, and I was getting a little unfulfilled and also unsuccessful, just realizing I wasn't as funny as the other lead comedy writers. And I really wanted to switch over to TV drama. And to do that is kind of difficult in Hollywood. You get pigeonholed. So I wrote a TV drama, TV pilot, and I tried to sell it and no one wanted to make it, but I loved the idea. And they all said, this is a cool idea. And my agent just said, you know what? People like this idea. Why don't you go write this as a young adult book series? And I go, book series? I'm not an author. I'm not a novelist. And he goes, no, you obviously can do it. You have the idea figured out. We can make this happen. So my agent was able to sell that idea as a YA book series. And overnight, I had the opportunity to become an author, and I sat down to write those books. I was terrified. And then by page 2 or 3, I was like, okay, I kind of remember how to write in prose, and this is happening, and I'm enjoying it. And that's how I'm an author now.
That's a great story. Can you tell us what shows you worked on?
Yeah, you probably wouldn't know them. They were all short-lived and canceled, which is why I had to get out of it. The first show was called The In-Betweeners. It was on MTV. And the second show was called Malibu Country on ABC. That one had Reba McEntire and Lily Tomlin. So some heavy hitters, but things still get canceled.
That happens. That happens. Who else has a question? If that's a wonderful origin story, though, it shows you how when bad things happen, sometimes they turn into good things. You just can't.
It's always easy to see that looking backwards, harder to feel it looking forwards.
So true. So true. Renee wants to know what's next for you.
Great question. So we are lucky enough that we did sell the TV rights to Kill Show. That doesn't mean it just goes onto the air, but we are now working on developing the TV version of this, which involves bringing on some heavy hitters if we can and getting it set up. So that is priority number one. I have such a fun idea for a movie that I'm trying to write, which like fits in with the movies I loved growing up. It is just like a traditional sports romantic comedy. Like if people know, obviously Bull Durham or The Cutting Edge even is a little more obscure. And then I have another idea for a book. As I said, the problem is I haven't figured it out and raced into my office to do it. But this book, the next book I write is going to be so different. It is not going to have a dead body. It's not going to have an investigation. It is going to be much more kind of interior, romantic, dare I say boring. And now I'm trying to figure out how to do this book without making it boring.
I can't wait to read that. Send that right to me the minute you get it. I can't wait to see the TV show of this, because I was thinking about it when you were talking about it, that this is so cinematic and so visual. And then I think, well, how did he do that? It's not really written that way with a lot of description, but I totally can picture it. And I can hear, audibly, I can hear the voices of these people, and I know the tone and I know the rhythm, and this is totally going to work. So I cannot wait to see that. I know this is going to happen. We are out of time, you all. We have time for one more question. Let's do one more question, because I don't want to let Daniel go.
And I want to jump in. I see people asking the name of the YA series. That series is called The Ones. If you didn't hear Hank say it earlier, The Ones.
The Ones and the Equals, is that also?
Yes, that's the second one.
Okay, cannot wait to read that as well. And Renee is asking, was it more difficult to write YA or adult novels?
You know what? I was surprised to learn the answer to that. It's a great question. It was more difficult to write the YA books. And what I found as I was turning chapters into my editor at the time is she would keep urging me to kind of not repeat myself at the end of an important moment, but spell something out in a way where I was just like, no, I just conveyed all of that. And then she would say, yeah, but now you have to make it clear. And it's not that young people are dumb or can't process things. You just have to make things a little bit clearer. Where with this book, Kill Show, I got to live in such a gray area and have subtlety. And that is so much more interesting to me of like, can I convey essential information without spelling it out? And in the YA world, that's not the methodology. And in the adult fiction world, it was a lot more fun to do that.
I'm going to sneak two more things. And one is I want you to see what Randy Gravett said. I work at Barnes & Noble in West Nyack and will be hand selling both of today's Crime Time books.
Amazing.
So you're going to
Thank you, everyone.
That's great. That's so great. Also, in the book, and this is my final question, I promise. In the book, you have, I was going to say, touching explanation is the word I'm searching for so unsuccessfully. A touching explanation for the title.
All right. So go ahead, Finn. Yeah, if you can finish.
Real? Is that real or is that?
Yes, I saw someone ask that earlier. I was excited, and it is such a fun question to answer. So there's an anecdote about how that title came about, but I'll explain the real version in this conversation. So the title comes from a phrase that my little sister invented when she was 5 years old. And it's whenever my parents were watching a movie or a TV show that was too violent or serious for kids, and the kids would get, shunted off to their bedrooms, my sister would say, "Why can't I watch? Is it a kill show?" And that was her name for that type of content. And now for the past 30 odd years, that's just a normal phrase in my family of, oh, is that movie a kill show? Is that book a kill show? And it's not even a joke. It's just a descriptor for a certain type of genre. And when I was thinking about this world, I was like, oh my God, my sister invented a phrase that perfectly encapsulates that. It's going to go on the cover. She now takes credit for 1% of the success of this, but it's nice that it's this kind of family inside joke that we all get to see on the cover. So that's really fun for us.
I love that. It was really fun to read and very sweet to read. We've been talking about, as you know, Kill Show by Daniel Sweren-Becker, which I adore this book. I've said it a million times and I'll say it again. You run and get this novel, but one of you will not have to run and get it because one of you is we're going to spin the wheel and see who actually gets to win this book. So let's spin the wheel of fun and see who gets this. And I love this. I see all your names. I love seeing you all. And I always think this should have music.
Yes.
And the winner is Deborah Press. Hooray, Deborah, you will absolutely love this. So you're going to get some information about how to email me, and I will email the producer, and the producer will email the publisher, and the publisher will get the book to you. And that's how this works. So many people involved, and yet it all works so gorgeously. Daniel, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for putting up with my gushing, but
I was not putting up. Thank you for having me. This was really fun. So it was great.
Good. Now you all stick around because in a minute, I'm just going through the books on my desk. In a minute, we're going to have Vanessa Lilly with her marvelous, chilling novel called Blood Sisters, which is about why so many Indigenous women have gone missing. It's a marvelous and terrific story. And next week, if you can't come at 4:00, don't worry, you can be here next week with us. At 3:00, we'll have Nina Simon with Mother-Daughter Murder Night. This is a Reese's selection. It's really, really good. Totally different, funny, sweet, 3 women, mother, daughter, granddaughter. It's great. And then this book, which I will hold right side up in a minute, Distant Sons by Tim Johnston, which is next on my TBR. So join us for both of those books next week at 3 and 4. And in about 15 minutes, go get a cup of coffee or some lemonade or whatever you want at the time where you are, and come hear Vanessa Lilly talk about Blood Sisters. In the meantime, once again, thank you, Daniel, for talking with us about Kill Show. And remember, all of you, wherever we see you next, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.